And opponent is Robbie Cordell.
And he's playing an interesting deck. It looks like it's a green-black deck. 4 copies of Dross Messenger, 4 copies of Thragtest, 2 Disciple of Bolus. So not exactly the green-black deck that Brian Kibler has been touting a lot over the past few months. Although it does play 4 copies of Desecration Demon.
That's exciting.
For those of you who aren't aware what Desecration Demon is, it is a 2 black, 2 colorless, 6/6 creature from Return to Ravnica. Not the best card against a token-based strategy because, you know, they can just sacrifice a creature at the beginning of combat to tap it. But it does grow larger. But Robbie does have cards like Sign in Blood, 3 Tragic, 3 copies of Mutilate, which are pretty good if you have a Desecration Demon in play because it's unlikely you're going to have 6 swamps to kill your own guy. So we'll see if Robbie gets his dream draw of turn 4 Desecration Demon, turn 5 Mutilate, wipe your board and attack.
I mean, Robbie's deck basically is the Rock from a classic sense. This is a mid-range control deck with some monster creatures.
Yeah, and Chris does have, you know, cards like Rootbound Defenses, which allow him to populate and make his guys indestructible, but not very good against a card like Mutilate.
Yeah, Mutilate is one of those really, really awesome cards that it doesn't kill the creatures per se, it just shrinks them and then they die.
Yeah. And interesting, Robbie actually has 2 copies of Cremate in his main deck, which kind of goes to show you how much he respects Reanimator. But it happens to be decent against Chris's deck because Chris does have 4 copies of Snapcaster Mage.
I can actually see Sol Malka, if he's at home watching this, hearing 2 Cremate and going, yeah, just like my Phyrexian, God, what's that name of that 1-mana artifact? Oh, geez.
Oh,
Phyrexian Furnace,
Furnace,
just like my Phyrexian Furnaces.
And Robbie went turn 3 Liliana and down-ticked it to force Chris to sacrifice his Call the Conclave token. So I bet Chris is kind of regretting not casting Voice of Resurgence to run first. But, so it looks like Robbie has a Garruk. Does he have a 4th land to cast a Garruk here?
I mean, Liliana into Garruk is just an awesome, awesome start for a deck like Robbie's.
The problem is, though, Voice of Resurgence is so good that
yes,
even if he played the Garruk, he would just be forced to make a token because he couldn't just kill the Voice because he doesn't have a blocker for it. So it looks like we might just get an uptick for Liliana here. He does have a Tragic Slip. But here's a Dross Messenger, so looks like he might lose the Liliana this turn. Let's see whether or not he just chooses to uptake it here.
I mean, knowing that it could just die, he might let it live just to keep his cards.
Well, he has so many. He has a lot of good cards in his hand. Liliana is one of the few planeswalkers where you don't necessarily we see people choose not to uptake it very often, just because, you know, unless you're in a position where you're discarding a land or you have no cards left in your hand, you really don't want to lose a spell, especially if you're behind, which Robbie is slightly right now, but not too far behind.
Double Voice. Now, I've heard people call Voice just the second coming of Safehold Elite, but that seems like it's very much underestimating Voice's power.
I mean, that's insanity to me to say that. I think it's probably the best creature they've made since.
I am right there with you.
What's that card? The 1-mana
Boros
card.
Reckoner? Oh, you're talking Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, it's probably the best creature they made since Deathrite Shaman.
Cremate for the card draw. Hunting.
And it looks like he targeted his Liliana as opposed to the Call Conflict, which could come back to hurt him later on.
A unsummon to clear the way. Chris Andersen coming in for 4 damage on this attack. And that's assuming nothing else happens.
And Voice is somewhat of a beating against Robbie's deck. I mean, it's a beating against any deck, but a strategy like Robbie's deck, it's a lot of 1-for-1s. He has a card like Mutilate, but Mutilate's not very good against 2 Voice of Resurgences.
And Snapcaster, is it going to be a Call of the Conclave?
And again, you know, Robbie did have the option to cremate that call. He chose not to.
That seems like that might have just not been respecting the existence of blue cards from Chris.
Yeah, I think if you're seeing a Bant token deck, you have to imagine they're playing Snapcaster.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the reason you play Bant is so that you can go Advent of the Worm and then Snapcaster back later in the game.
Yeah,
so.
if you haven't done that yet at home, you should try it. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's right up there with Progenitor, Mimic, Craterhoof Behemoth.
And Robbie here, not...
Okay, so it looks like he's gonna cremate us, unsummon. So he's all out of cremates. He does draw a 4th land. Unfortunately, it is a overgrown tomb, so he will take 2 if he wants to put into play untapped.
I mean, his hand, Tragic Slip ×2, I think. I saw at least 1, but if it's ×2, then he can kill 2 creatures reasonably.
Yeah, he has a Liliana, which really isn't good against this board. He has the Mutilate, which again, even if he did have, if he could cast it this turn, he has the Overgrown Tomb. It would be Mutilate for 2, which would basically kill his Voice of Resurgence and his Snapcaster, but would leave Chris with an army of tokens on his side of the board.
Tragic Slip the Snapcaster.
Yeah.
Chris lets it happen. He's got an Unsummon in his hand, though. Second Tragic Slip.
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't choose to unsummon the Snapcaster there and get a little more value later in the game. But so just choose to let it die. Chris is only going to be able to attack for 4 this turn.
Against a strategy like the Rock, Voice of Resurgence is perhaps the most insane. Like,
yeah, it's Voice and Thragtusk are the cards just too good in this matchup. Chris doesn't have Thragtusk, obviously, but double Voice is doing a lot of work. If Robbie can sort of get a blocker in play, I think he's in reasonable shape because Chris doesn't really have any other action. Here comes the Garruk, so he's going to get at least 1 Wolf token. Don't want to kill the Voice because that really doesn't do much for you.
The poor Wolf is just going to get unsummoned.
Does Chris has another unsummon in his hand?
Yeah.
And again, if he unsummoned the Snapcaster, he would have been able to cast the Snapcaster this turn and then bounce the token, and then attack for 6 as opposed to just 4. But let's see. It looks like he's going to try to see if he has plenty of mana. He doesn't need to do it at the end of the turn. Another Voice of Resurgence. So yeah, we're going to go all in, kill Garruk here, and play another Voice.
What's that last card in his hand?
It looks like it's just a land. I think it might be just a breeding pool. So Chris doesn't have really any gas. Granted, 3 Voice of Resurgence is pretty much all you need. But here comes a Thragtusk.
Boom.
Now,
this
Thragtusk versus Voice is an interesting fight.
Yeah, and I mean, these guys can all come in, do 4 damage, but the Thragtusk will still stand there.
Yeah, this is, Robbie, Robbie can get Chris to brick on a couple more draw steps, Robbie's in reasonable shape. He still has a lot of removal spells in his hand. He has a Dross Messenger, he has a Tragic Clip, he has that Liliana, which if he can deal with the Voices, will eventually start to make an impact on the board. He has a second Thragtusk too, so yeah, unless Chris drew something really powerful right here, Robbie might be able to let those Thragtusks might just take over this game.
I mean, in game 1, Chris's ways to turn this game around look like Advent of the Worm, look like... I think it's basically going to get down to cards like Advent, and he has to go over the top with it.
I think Advent is good. I think any of his Populate cards are reasonable because he's going to get a token right here.
Yep.
So if he can start making copies of that XX Elemental, it's going to start getting bigger than the Thragtusk. So, but again, it might be a little too late just because Robbie just drew another removal spell in Abrupt Decay, which is obviously very, very good against those tokens. He's probably going to drop the second Thragtusk right here, gain a little more life, and then allow him to set up a really good Mutilate later on.
Boom. And Syncopate?
Yep, so there's
excellent.
a Syncopate.
That is really good news for Chris Andersen.
Yeah, exactly the draw he needed. So now a top deck Rootborn Defenses would be great.
And Chris, I think, is going to be forced to go all in on an attack here. What is that hand?
I think you have to just keep attacking here. You're going to lose an Elemental, maybe. No, you're going to lose another Voice of Resurgence. But you get in for 5, and you get another Elemental. So
in for 5. And from Robbie's perspective, holding that Mutilate in hand, he does know that Chris has counterspells now. He's seen the Snapcaster Mages, but he's at a position where, and there comes the Elemental, he's in a position where I think he just has to just run it out there.
No, I think he's still fine to not
How much
cast
life
it,
is he at?
He's only at 13. He's at 13, which is reasonable.
No, he's at 8.
Oh, he's at 8? But
yeah,
still,
they haven't changed it yet.
But still, he has got Abrupt Decay and Tragic Slip, so I don't think he's really afraid of those creatures right now.
Main phase kills the Voice.
So it looks like he is just going to cast Mutilate here and wipe the board. Although
he's thinking about Lily.
He only has 3. Yeah, I don't... This is a dangerous play here because it's only a Mutilate for 3, correct? So if Chris did have a Restoration Angel, he would actually save his entire board. Yeah, so
It worked out.
a little
That was
risky. Yeah, it was definitely a risky play on Rob's. I don't think he needed to go for it there just because you have abrupt decay. You probably would have been able to trade. You probably would have been able to wipe off Chris's side of the board.
Yeah.
Just with the abrupt decay, because if Chris had a restoration angel, there or an advent of the worm, he probably just survives that mutilate and wins the game outright. So risky play on Rob, but Chris had nothing anyway. So Rob can drop a Liliana now. See if he wants to uptick it. Not sure what's in his hand.
He's got a Geralf's Messenger, and I'm not sure what else.
Okay, so it looks like he is discarding. So this guy's a swamp.
And here comes the Messenger.
Yep.
Boom.
So, Rob, let's see if Liliana can help Rob just lock this game up. Looks like a Simic Charm maybe drawn by Chris. Yeah, so.
Not exciting for Chris.
Not too powerful right here. Chris is going to be able to just start upticking Liliana here. He just drew a land. He's going to play it, uptick Liliana, and attack.
And then we're going to see the bounce.
Yep.
No!
Oh, so he chose not to bounce.
Oh, wow, Chris.
Yeah, Chris could have bounced the Geralf's Messenger there
and gotten rid of it for good.
Activation, so.
I mean, it probably would not have mattered at that point, but it still would have been pretty solid.
I don't know. Chris wasn't dead right there. Granted, Liliana was at 5, but he's facing out Thragtusk. Advent to the Worm off the top. You're right back in it.
This is true.
Yeah, maybe a little loose play at the end there by Chris, but still, I think that he's not in the worst shape because after board, he's still a token deck with a lot of interesting options.
One of the things he can also have in particularly awesome against Liliana is Locks It on Smiter. If you've ever discarded anything to a Liliana and then had it hit play instead of hit the graveyard, it's just an awesome feeling. He only has 2 Smiters though. Other than that, I think he might end up going into Dissipates because this is a slow deck that he's playing against.
Yeah, I think maybe you want to Dissipate because you didn't see Cavern of Souls. It's unlikely he has it because of cards like Geralf's Messenger, and you're kind of all over the place with your creature type. So maybe he kind of wants to Dissipate just to deal with a Thragtusk, because obviously if he was able to counter the Thragtusk there, the game is a completely different story. So I think going up to Dissipate's fine, especially if you're on the play, because one of the few answers Robbie has to a Geist Stain Trap is Mutilate.
Yep.
So playing a Geist and then having a Dissipate to stop a Mutilate might be one of the ways that Chris can steal some of these games.
Yeah, one of the things, he did get Robbie down pretty far. One of his weapons that we did not even see in this game is Geist of St. Traft, and if Chris can get down a Geist against an open board and not have a Liliana kill it, at that point when he untaps, that's just going to be really frightening for Robbie.
Yeah, I think, and the thing is, that's why I think he wants the Dissipates, because Mutilate is pretty much the only answer Robbie has to a Geist Stain Trap. It's going to be hard for him to block with cards like Simic Charm and Unsummon, along with Celestial Charm. And Chris has a lot of 2-drops. He's got Voice of Resurgence, which is the perfect card against a Liliana activation. He's got Call of the Conclave. He also has Celestial Charm, which he can just make a token with if he chooses to, if he wants to go for the Geist plan. So, yeah, I definitely think that it's going to be tough for Robbie to deal with a Geist Stain Trap when Robbie's on the draw.
Yeah. Looking at Robbie's sideboard, what do you see over there that you like?
He's got Underworld Connection and Golgari Charm and Appetite for Brains. Not really something you want in this matchup. 3 copies of Duress, I think you might want those cards to come in just because, he saw counter spells. He also knows that there's going to be cards like Advent of the Worm and, being able to get rid of a Celestia Charm or a Call of the Conclave could be the difference between Chris having a 2-drop to protect his Geist against a Liliana. So yeah. I can see Duress coming in. Vraska, not very good right here. Mutilate, probably want the 4th Mutilate because, again, it's one of your few answers to Geist. And Ground Seal, probably not better than Cremate. Maybe you want it in there just in case you're afraid of Voice of Resurgence. But, I don't know if Ground Seal comes in or not. He doesn't have that many cards that he really cares about taking out. Geralf's Messenger probably stays in. Desecration Demon, again, not sure how great it is in this matchup, but you don't have that many cards in your sideboard that are really good against the token strategy.
I mean, if I knew what Chris Andersen's list was, like if I actually was able to look at it before the match, I might consider shaving into those Sign-In Bloods, because it might just be too dangerous to do. So I could see having that be a thing that you cut into, but like you said, a lot of these cards that he has here, Desecration Demon, Sign in Blood, those might be question marks when it comes to trying to defend yourself against a deck like Chris's.
Yeah, I still would probably keep the Sign in Blood in just because, again, I think there are games where, especially if you're in the draw, you want to dig for a Liliana because it's your only answer to Geist in a lot of ways. So it's not the best against Voice of Resurgence, but still, it's one of those cards that you might have to go for.
Chris Andersen showing no white on turn 2, no creature on turn 2. It's good news for Robbie, not good news for Chris, obviously.
Yeah, pretty interesting keep here by Chris. Obviously, he has the double Voice of Resurgence over. He has a Syncopate, though, and a Snapcaster, so looks like we're going to see a Syncopate here. He really needs a 4th land here. Even if it's not a white, it'll allow him to cast. Okay,
boom,
so
there we go.
Perfect land there for him. He's able to play a Glacial Fortress. He can now cast a Voice of Resurgence if he chooses. And he also has a Snapcaster for the Syncopate next turn if he wants. Here's that Sign in Blood.
Boom, 2 cards.
And it looks like he did at least keep in 1 Sign in Blood. Let's see if all 4 copies are left in his deck.
I mean, I like Sign in Blood. It's one of those cards that is a little worrisome for me when I'm playing against Geist of St. Trapp.
Yeah, especially if you're on the draw. I could see shaving some of those numbers. Definitely.
Yeah, it's one of those cards that is still very good. Turn 4, 2 more mana.
And it looks like we're gonna have an Abrupt Decay on the Voice. So pretty good start for Chris. Syncopate your Drowse Messenger and make you go 1-on-1 for my Voice of Resurgence, which isn't the worst play right here.
And is that another white source?
It looks like it's a Holofound, yes. So it looks like, yeah.
Another, he's saving up Snapcaster for a counterspell?
So it looks like he wants to go to a Snapcaster play. If he wanted to be a little more aggressive, he could have played the Holofound untapped and went for a Voice and called the Conclave, but looks like maybe he's a little afraid of Mutilate, so wants to play a little more cautiously.
Lily.
And here comes Liliana, and this is I kind of would have preferred to be a little more aggressive, I think, just because Snapcaster Syncopate isn't the most effective counterspell plan. You know, you're effectively saying, okay, if you tap out for Thragtusk, I can counter it, but beyond that, I can't do anything else. So
and he
looks like he's going to just cast it to. He's going to sacrifice that instead of Liliana, basically. And he's going to sacrifice that to the Liliana. So here we might see her. Now we might see the Voice come down. Oh, okay.
Rootbound Defenses in hand. Liliana dead. Snapcaster, Voice, Rootbound Defenses.
And again, it looks like he still wants to try to counter. It looks like he's really afraid of Thragtusk here. So he wants to be able to go Snapcaster Syncopate for 2. I guess he's basically just afraid of Thragtusk right here.
Another Lily. This slow play is not working out for him.
It's basically he's playing around Thragtusk, but he's losing to. It's forcing him in a really awkward position. And Robbie does have a Thragtusk, but he's not casting it. He knows better. He's like, all right, I know what your plan is. I'm just going to do something different here.
That's not going to work. And oh no! Look, it'll populate. It'll populate.
Yeah, he can populate, but again, he's in such a better position if he just casts that Voice of Resurgence.
Yep.
You know. So,
how many cards he asks? Too many.
And it looks like, populate here. It's, you get a token. I don't know. Maybe you want to cast a Snapcaster. Kind of an awkward position here just because you have a Voice of Resurgence in your hand and a Call of the Conclave token. So.
And giving up the plan is one of the things he's considering here. Nope, he's going to stick with this plan. So he's going to stick with Snappy.
Sticking with it. And again, I'm fine with this. I don't necessarily agree with this plan, but I think if you're going to have a plan, at least stick to it. You can't go, fluctuate back and forth. He really hasn't done anything, and the fact that he missed the land drop, still your plan is somewhat reasonable, So stick with your plan and pass the turn. Otherwise,
now he's going to put down that second Voice, leaves himself with the ability to syncopate for 1.
Yeah. So he can syncopate for 1 here,
and Robbie has a Swamp in hand.
So Robbie did kind of slow roll the land there and played a Thragtusk.
Boom.
Which is perfect. So I think Robbie did actually slow roll that land a little bit. I think he read Chris for what his plan was.
If you want to go back and rewatch this match, you'll see him flip through his cards and then bring the swamp to the front of his hand and tap it.
Yeah, I definitely think Robbie played this game great. He read Chris for what his plan was and just said, okay, I'll slow roll my land, make you try to cast one of your 2-drops. Because you can kind of tell, the way Chris was playing this game, you can kind of read for what he was trying to do. You can tell that he had to fluctuate between, should I cast a Call of the Conclave or Voice? Robbie kind of read him for what he was trying to do here. So he figured, all right, if I slow roll my 6 land drop, if Chris has another land in his hand, he's probably just going to try to go for it there. So now Thragtusk, and granted, Chris, it's a reasonable plan because Thragtusk is a very dangerous card. And it's very good against Chris's deck, so...
Okay, we see snappy rootbound defenses getting another elemental. The elemental now 4/4, kills the Thragtusk, does not die itself. That's actually a really awesome sequence.
Yeah, of course, a Mutilate here would be somewhat devastating.
Does he have one? I think he does, actually. I
So
thought I saw one.
It looks like he has 1, 2, 3, 4 swamps in play, or is that a forest? It looks like it's 4 swamps. Yeah, he has no forest in his deck, so... If a Mutilate here would be pretty devastating. He has a Sign in Blood if he wants to try to dig for one. Can't see. He does have a Thragtusk. So yeah, so it looks like he has...
See that little tap he did? He did that earlier with the swamp.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew what Chris was doing, and he was playing for it.
It definitely felt like he knew what was going on there. So looks like we have a Abrupt Decay, Thragtusk, another Sign in Blood, Disciple of Bolas. And are we going to see a Mutilate here? And yes, we do see a Mutilate. So
what a
pretty
monster.
Devastating. Chris is left with just a 1/1 token. He does have 2 Call of the Conclaves, so he can grow that elemental to a 3/3 at least. He just throws a land for a turn. I think Chris has to try to be a little aggressive here. Not ideal, but the way he played this game, he's not left with many options right now.
If you're wondering where that elemental came from, well, there was a voice in play. So even though the old elemental died, the new elemental comes, so that was not Chris being sneaky. Nope, there was an elemental on the table.
Yeah. So it looks like we're going to have a pre-combat. He's going to cast at least one Call of the Conclave. Frankly, I don't really see why you wouldn't cast the second, just because at this point in the game, I'm not sure what you expect to happen.
Boom.
Yeah.
There you go.
You got to try to get the damage in that you can. Obviously, you're playing off the top of your deck, and Robbie has a grip full of cards, so you have to imagine that you're not in the best position. But still, a top deck rootbound defense is reasonable. Druid's Deliverance, anything that populates.
I mean, he does have a ton of populate in this deck.
I'm sure Chris isn't in love with his board state, but I don't think holding back a Call of Conclave is going to help him.
Robbie drops the Thragtusk that he's been holding back. And Disciple of Bolas in his hand, which is going to, at some point, add insult to injury.
He also has a Desecration Demon and an Abrupt Decay. So, a lot of options for Robbie right here. Abrupt Decay is going to deal with an elemental, or no, deals with a token. So, yeah, 2-for-1s. Deals with the Centaur before combat damage, so the Thragtusk is able to kill it and survive. So now we have Drowse Messenger along with Disciple of Bolas, so could be a very good turn for Robbie right here.
Combo.
And what are we going to do? Oh,
he's going to go for 5. He's going to go all the way.
Go for value here.
And Chris's move there with his hand. If you know Chris Andersen, I can practically hear Chris inside screaming, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Have your fun.
Disciple of Bolas, a card that has not seen very much play, but really awesome card. 4 mana for a 2/1. When it comes into play, sacrifice another creature, gain X life, and draw X cards, where X is that creature's power.
So it looks like we have a Tragic Slip to finish off the Centaur on Chris's side of the board. And here's Drowse Messenger.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Robbie Cordell, there is no reason not to drop every creature in your hand in this matchup.
Yeah, he has nothing to fear from a Bant tokens list.
And Chris drops his hand down, says that's it.
Yeah, nothing else to see here. And
quick 2-0 from the Rock.
2-0. And it's interesting, Chris had a really good start in game 1, but Thragtusk trumps Voice of Resurgence. And, you kind of saw that in game 1. In game 2, you can question should Chris have been a little more aggressive. Obviously, he was afraid of Thragtusk, and Robbie did in fact have the Thragtusk. I'm not quite sure how this game would have played out, but I think Chris might have actually been able to pull that game out had he started out with an aggressive start, because he by being defensive, he just put himself in this awkward position where he was basically throwing resources at a Liliana. And that's not something you could do against a rock deck. You can't let the rock deck is usually the one that's one for winning itself and running out of cards.